the assault bike. You either love it or you hate it. That's pretty much it. But there's some ways that we can make this a little bit better for everybody, and part of that is just how to set it up for your body. So let's talk a little bit about how to set up the bike and maybe a couple efficiency tips on how to make this suck just a little bit less, maybe. So everybody's gonna be a little bit different based on your height, limb length, etc. So this isn't necessarily a one size fits all, but it's gonna at least get you roughly to where you need to be so that way you don't have to take as much guesses. Things to just be aware of in case you didn't know, the seat does a couple things, moves forward, back, and then also moves up and down. So these are really gonna be the two things that we're gonna pay the most attention to when it comes to setting up the bike for yourself. So I already have this bike set up for myself. So for me, it's gonna be one notch forward on the seat, and then I'm gonna be at a number 5. So I'm 5'10", this generally works pretty well for me. So the first thing that I wanna talk about is where you need to be height-wise. So if you're sitting up nice and tall on the bike, I like to kind of put my hands on the pedals for this, or the handles just for this one. But you're gonna set your heel on the pedal, and as you come back around and you're sitting up nice and tall, when that pedal's at about that 6 o'clock position, you should have a little bit of wiggle room, okay? Because then once you set your foot down, and we're looking at middle of your foot, kind of ball for the most part, you're gonna have a slight bending in your knee, and that's ultimately what we're looking for at the very bottom of that pedal. So now we gotta figure out where to move the seat forward and backwards. For me, I'm a fan of sitting a little bit further back on the seat. It kind of makes me feel like my whole butt's at least being supported. And from here, we're gonna pedal a little bit up. And so we're trying to get that pedal into essentially that 3 o'clock position. Once we're at that 3 o'clock position, when we're kind of sitting onto the bike, we should be able to see roughly that knee is gonna be, if we draw a line straight down, should be kind of roughly over where we're gonna be pushing up against that pedal. Somewhere in that area is gonna be pretty good. And that's generally gonna decide where we're at. So we don't necessarily want to be too far forward. That's going to bring the pedal kind of behind our knee, and we don't want to go too far back because that's going to kind of push it a little bit too far forward over our knee. That's just going to create just more of an inefficient spin on the pedal, and we don't necessarily need to do that, right? It's all about power and efficiency. So the last little bit when it comes to riding the bike is how we're actually going to be on it. I'm not a huge fan of sitting super straight up because it kind of makes you reach a little bit for the handles. You kind of lose a little bit of that power. You tend to start twisting a little bit more than necessary. So I'm a fan of leaning just a little bit forward into these handles. What that's really going to allow you to do is create kind of tension all the way through the body. So that way, as you are pushing with the pedal and pushing down onto the handle, you're able to kind of create this kind of cross tension. So everything should be super tight as you're going through and pedaling on the bike. Now, ideally, that's the position that we want to kind of maintain, kind of, again, that rigid, that tight body as we're kind of pushing and pulling on the bike and the handles. You really want to keep that in mind as you go through, even when you do start getting tired, because the more that we get loosey-goosey, the more that we're going to start losing or leaching power through our body. It's just like any Olympic lifts. You're not going to try and do everything with bent arm, catch a snatch with a bent arm, or not brace your middle as you're doing any of these movements because you start folding like a wet noodle. So the more that we can kind of stay tight, stay tense, the better. And with everything, especially like gymnastics, the more that we can kind of stay tight to the center of our gravity or center of our body, the stronger we're going to be. So as you are biking, you want to try and keep those elbows in, keeping that nice straight forward motion as we pedal, not letting those elbows flare out, sometimes you see people kind of getting that big swirly kind of, I don't even know what this is, weird dance move thing. It's inefficient. So stay tight, stay leaned into the handles, keep that tension through your body. And when you start doing that, you'll probably notice those watts or those RPMs really start going up a lot more. So tight. So one last time, quick checkpoint to make sure your bike is set. Heel on the pedal. You should be able to just wiggle that foot when the pedal's at that 6 o'clock position. When we are at the 3 o'clock position and you're on that toe, you should be able to have your knee pretty much right over the toe. And then the last little bit is making sure we stay tense by leaning into those handles, keeping that middle squeeze nice and tight, and driving hard with those elbows in, staying rigid. So if you can maintain those, you're gonna be looking pretty good. So enjoy the bike, have some fun, and get good at it, because then you can beat your friends, and that's even more bragging rights. And one more thing that you can do to impress your friends is learn how to get off the bike in style. So let's let the momentum of the pedal carry you over and just kind of step off.